And we're live. Good morning. Welcome to another conversation with MOXY. I'm Natasha Zibko, co-founder of MOXY, the voice of women in infrastructure. And with me this morning is Irene Walsh-Garcia. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and to share a little bit about myself and what I'm doing. Again, Irene Walsh Garcia. I'm just going to start with how I came to be here. I've got 25 years in the construction industry. This is not something I set out to do, so I'm kind of sitting here almost amazed that I'm here 25 years. I started out with a major in animal science and but graduated with a degree in criminal justice only to realize that's not what I wanted to do. And I have a family of electricians, and my sister had started her electrical apprenticeship, and I didn't know what my next step should be. And so I applied to the apprenticeship program here in Chicago. And I got in. And so I started my apprenticeship. I worked my way through. It was certainly a challenging 5 years, but I did it. And then I was already making plans during my apprenticeship for something else. I'm like, this isn't quite lining up to what I see myself doing, long term. I went back to school, actually, I got a second degree, figuring I'll be a teacher. That sounds like a great idea. And but by the end of it, I was fortunate enough to be working with a general foreman who was very supportive, but also very challenging. And I started enjoying my work more. Not only was I enjoying my work more, but he saw potential in me, and he asked if I ever considered going into estimating or project management. At that time, I had only ever seen, older men as the project manager on the job site. I'm thinking, I'm going to have to be out here for 20 years before I can make that transition. And he assured me that wasn't the case. He said, nope. He's like, you can, with your experience in the field, you can make that transition whenever it is that you decide. And with that, I'm like, well, that would be great. I wouldn't have to do any more school. And I could, stay in construction, which I was enjoying a lot of, but not all of it. And that's what I did. So after 6 years of being an electrician, I moved into the office. And that transition had its ups and downs as well. And so that is why I now offer a from field to office coaching program, because that is, first off, people or women in particular need to be aware that an opportunity is even exists, and that for me is what made the difference. So learning about an opportunity, finding out the steps that it takes, and then realizing it's possible. So that is one of the programs that I offer as a women in construction coach. And so I made that transition. And a year after becoming a junior estimator for an electrical contractor, I became the project manager on a 60-story high rise. Not a promotion I was quite ready for, but I didn't even see it coming. I had estimated the project. There was no one else around to run it. And so I started going to meetings and getting submittals together and doing the intro stuff. And they liked what I was doing. And so they're like, you're just got to keep doing that. And then, but take, as the official project manager. And to say I was overwhelmed would be an absolute understatement. Even if it had been a smooth going project, although 60 stories out of the ground, there's got to be challenges. It wasn't easy, to say the least. And that's but I grew and learned so much from that experience, that even though it consumed me for the 3 years I was on that project, I wouldn't change a thing about that. And I mean, and it's from that experience that I started mentoring and coaching women in construction. After that, I would see maybe a woman working for a general contractor, and I would say, hey, like, let's grab lunch. And we would start talking, and she would share with me different challenges she was having. And I was like, I can help with that. I've been there. And so we would discuss like how to get that promotion, how to get that raise, how to be taken more seriously. She was realizing that her male counterpart who started with the company at the same time was getting that promotion and she wasn't. So a big part of it is positioning. I would teach the women I was speaking with to how to position yourself for that promotion, and I love doing it more as much as I enjoyed being a project manager, and it was exciting, and it still is exciting to a certain extent. I loved helping women find success in this industry, and it through those conversations I'm just like this is what I want to do. This is I mean there's other women I've been through the challenges. I've gotten to the other side. I have everything that I've learned from them. And if I can help other women do the same, like yes, like it was like I stumbled on my whole purpose. And so since that point, I've gotten several coaching credentials. I want to make sure that I'm bringing the most value to anyone I'm working with, and just making sure that people are benefiting from my experience. And so that's been a big part of what I'm doing, along with being a mom and still, working as a project manager. And there's so many balls in the air, right? And I also I feel like I need to just share. I dropped my 5-year-old son off at kindergarten this morning. So it's everything all at once. But I love it. I love the momming while working and coaching, and just putting all the pieces together, and keeping it moving forward. I know a lot of I've been on projects where I'm the project manager and I'm dealing with the foreman or general foreman, and they're coming to me and telling me that the sky is falling, and they're just, oh, Irene, we're not going to make it, or what, this is wrong or that's wrong. And I always flip it around. It's just like, okay, let's just take a step back, because that's not solving anything. And I said, okay, let's take a step back, tell me the problem. And a lot of times I find that the problem is people are stuck in the problem, and I'm able to kind of reframe and change things into a solution or an opportunity. I've done that for the people I've worked with in the field, and I also do that for my clients, and just showing like, okay, yes, yep, what you've shared, like that sounds like facts A, B, and C. I said, but we can't stop that wall from being there. What can we do? What, are we going around it? Are we going over it? Or are we going under it? And just looking at things from a different perspective. And that's has made all the difference in my life, and in any situation that I've worked in. And so that's again a big part of what I'm doing right now.
There's so much to unpack in what you just said, in the story that you told, and thank you so much for sharing that with our listeners. One thing, our audience at MOXY and for conversations with MOXY is almost 50% men. And when Monica and I started this platform, we started it wanting to reach out to women and connect with them. And very quickly we realized that there were a lot of men that were tuning in and listening. I like to think in part that that's because our logo is slate blue and there's no cursive. I joke about that, but it's very welcoming in that regard for men to start kind of snooping around and saying, well, what are they doing over there? But also because they're curious, and because they realize the value that women bring to these organizations. They understand the necessity of bringing more women into the organizations, simply for the workforce standpoint. The talent pool that they've been picking from is really drying up. So they need to, expand who they're talking to in order to recruit for these jobs. So that being said, you didn't come into this in a very traditional way. When you were talking about going back to school and maybe wanting to be a teacher, and you have a degree in math and criminal justice. I mean, that's not something that says, oh, I'm going to be in the construction space, right?
No.
So talking to the audience of, first and foremost, maybe younger women that are trying to find their path, and like you, they're saying, I think I want to be a teacher. Nope, this isn't working out. Oh, I'm thinking criminal justice. No, this isn't working out. That it's okay to make these pivots, and that it's not, it's actually opening a new door. You talk about a new perspective, but also I want you to touch on for people, and let's talk about these men who have traditionally held these roles where you thought, oh gosh, I'm never going to be able to get there. It's going to be 20 years before I get there. How do you help these men recognize that someone who didn't come up maybe in the same path that they did is as valuable, maybe more valuable, because they have these diverse experiences that they're bringing? So I know that's kind of a lot, but can you give
Yeah,
us?
absolutely. So yeah, in regards to picking a path or finding a path, or even have, for me, I feel like construction found me. And I have several nieces and nephews who are college age, or getting to that age. And I share with them, I said, no one is expecting you to know what you want to do for the rest of your life at 18 years old. And the emphasis that,
Wait, I'm gonna say, except for my friend Heather, she knew she always wanted to be a nurse, and she's been a nurse for
well,
ever. I was always
you know
so
what?
jealous. I was like,
Yes,
how did you know that's what you wanted to do?
there are exceptions. There's absolutely exceptions. I feel like the doctors and lawyers, and not, of course, not across the board, but like there certainly are people who are like, yeah, that's what I'm going to be, and they're going to see it through the end, and hopefully go on to have a fantastic, long, happy career in that chosen field. I feel like so many of us, though, we don't know. And I look back at what I was exposed to in high school, and I went to a good high school. They didn't really let us know what our options even were. Like, I mean, given my strong, liking of math, like it probably would have been a great to like, oh, have you thought about being an actuary? I didn't know what that was until like many years later. I'm glad I didn't take that path, because I'm very happy with where I am, and the path that I took. But had that been mentioned sooner, that would have been a no-brainer. Job where you do math all day? Yes, sign me up, please. But most of us don't know, and it takes some trial and error to figure that out. And parents, right? We need to be supportive of that journey. If that journey, if you start out majoring in one thing and do something else, or taking the time off to figure things out, it's a lot of pressure at that age. And I hope I'm my son is 5, but I hope I'm doing a good job, like teaching him about different careers, and about life, and the world, and how things work. But it's, if he decides he wants to be, one thing 1 year, and if this goes in a different direction, like I hope, I still have the same mindset, 15 years from now, or what have you, to let him find his own path. And I feel like have I wouldn't be where I am now if it wasn't for the specific journey that I took. My sister, knew early on, she was more of a tomboy. She liked getting dirty. She liked working with tools. That never appealed to me early on. So my parents weren't shocked when she's like, yeah, I'm going to be an electrician. And when I'm like, I'll do what she's doing, they're like, are you sure? Like it wasn't as natural a choice for me as it was for her. And she's still working as an electrician. So, so I'm like, I don't know. Like, and I have a different mindset where if something's meant to be, and maybe that's not a great way of planning, but it's worked for me so far, I'll pursue it. Right. If I'm like, you know what, I'm going to apply for the apprenticeship program. If I get in, that's the plan. I'm going to be an electrician. If I didn't get in, then I'm like, that wasn't the plan, and I will find something else. And so I've done that kind of throughout my career, where I'm like, should I work for this company? Should I work for that company? And I'll pursue whatever the opportunity is until it either comes about or just no longer makes sense. And just being open to whatever comes my way. So absolutely, young people. I mean, heck, you can be 6 years old and still figuring out what you want to do with your life, right? I mean, why not?
Right. That's the beauty of it.
Right? If what you're doing isn't suiting you, like don't spend your time being miserable. And in regards to men in the industry, so this is
Well,
The
let
ways.
me just interrupt because you had talked about this man that you had worked for and how, you know, he was very encouraging. I mean, he was very much a sponsor of you and saying, no, you can do this and you don't have to wait 20 years and here's the path to do it. So I think there are, you know, you had someone that really pushed you in that direction when you didn't think it was possible.
Yes, no, and he was definitely it made a huge impact. I mean, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him letting me know this was a path I could take. Because you know, again, looking around, I was always intrigued by the well dressed people walking the job site. I'm like, I don't know if they're project managers, architects, engineers. Oh, okay. Like I always you can't miss them. And I always was intrigued. I'm like, oh, but I felt like, oh, I'd have to go through school for another 4 years or 8 years or whatever that might look like. I didn't um it didn't think I was on a path to do what they were doing. And I'm like, you know, because I was like, oh, that I could still be in construction, but just again in a different role. And and yeah, for him to point out that, you know, going into the office, you know, was a viable option for where I was, it was eye opening. And I think, you know, you don't know what you do. Like you can't, it's hard to be what you can't see. Right. I
Mhm.
think that's what, you know, the saying goes. And so in construction, unfortunately, there's still very few, you know, women executives and women VPs. Um, and there's all sorts of reasons for that. Right. Like one, it's, we're not so supported to get there. Right. And
Mhm.
you get to, I know for me, part of it was I was almost like selecting myself out because once I got married and I had a child, I'm like, I'm okay. Well, first up, I was also doing, I've also been doing coaching, and that's really where my passion is. And I know this where I want to put any extra energy that I have every day and every week is into that. But looking at what that next level looked like to me wasn't what I wanted for myself. I don't want to work 50, 60 plus hours a week. Um, and it just it was a little bit off-putting, but that's kind of a note for the industry, right? Like I think a lot of the newer generation are not willing to give up their lives for their work. And so I really see a shift in the industry coming, that if they want to recruit people, if they want people to take it seriously and to make their careers out of this industry, there has to be a shift where most of the time we're working a 40 to 50 hour week. And that supports women, that supports families, that supports anyone who might be interested in doing this. But how many young people are like, oh, great, you get to take this path and not see your family
Right.
if you choose to have one. But I think one of the ways that we can continue inviting people into the industry is making it so families are supported. I think for a couple of things. One, we have to acknowledge that things are more balanced, right? Men are, you know, dads are helping with the kids and are expected to pick them up or drop them off or help with the homework or any of those things. So not only do we need to make flexibility for women in the industry, but that flexibility allows more men to be there for their families, and that benefits everyone. Um, but just and I had another thought. Um, but
Oh,
just
this happens
you know,
to me all the time on the conversations. I'm like, "Wait, what
right?
was I talking about?" Like, I'll get back to it.
Yeah, no, but yeah, like making those shifts, you know, in the industry to make it more attractive. You know, I was in the field, you know, in my 20s, and it was a great time. I didn't have really any other people depending on me, any other commitments. So whatever was required of me, it was fine at that stage of my life. But had I, you know, stayed that way, and a lot of women do, right? They read, like my sister, they, you know, really like it, and then ultimately they have kids. She took a few years off because she didn't see it being compatible. But if there were like regular and clean bathrooms for moms on job sites, places to pump, places to store the milk, I mean, just flexibility around daycare. You know, most daycares, like you're lucky if you can drop your child off by 7. Usually it's more like 7:30. And you know, most job sites in Chicago, we start at 6 o'clock in the morning. Who's dropping their child off before 6 o'clock in the
Right.
morning? If you know, if the grandparents aren't involved. So there's so many different pieces, and part of it is just a certain level of accommodation, again, for men and women to support their families. But then just, there's like, again, there's all sorts of, opportunities to improve the current situation for construction.
So I want to go back to the how you moved into this role as project manager of this 60-story building. So there was no project manager, and you just started going into the meetings. Were you asked to go into the meetings to fill in, or did you realize no one's going in representing as a project manager, so we should be? So I'm just gonna, go in and grab your seat at the table and.
No, the whole thing developed so kind of almost slowly. I was the person who estimated the project. I did most of the takeoff on it. So I was the only one who actually knew what was in it, like what the blueprints look like. I could tell you, I could reference spec sections, I could tell you pages. I knew the project inside and out by the time we were awarded it. And so my boss is like, "Oh, it's easy. Just put together the submittals and start, coordinating. And oh, and here, by the way, here's our coordinator who's going to join you at the meetings." He almost made it sound like it was like, "This is easy."
Wait, is this the same guy that had wanted you to be a project manager?
No,
This is a different
no,
guy.
different
Okay.
person, different company at that point.
Okay.
So yeah, so he just, he saw that, like, yeah, just start doing it. We had the timing of it was tricky in that we had a really large project that was supposed to have already finished, and it hadn't. So we had two project managers tied up on their project. So we were ultimately lining up projects for them to run once they became available. So the idea
Right.
was I'm just going to sit on this one
Got it.
until someone else becomes available. But then we got a second high rise and
Yeah.
still nobody was available. So I got to go to those meetings and and oversee the coordination and submittal process for two high rises for probably a 6-month period, which was next level stressful. And
So at this time when this is going on, you're obviously learning a lot, you're upping your skill set. Was there ever a point in time when they said, "Oh, okay, thanks for sitting in on this, but we're going to bring in the real project manager now"? Did anyone try to push you out at a certain point in time?
once we got our third high rise, one of the project managers became available to run that one. And then ultimately, the other project manager took over the second project that I was overseeing. And then it was me running the first one. And I saw that through to the end.
And was there any talk at that point like, "Oh, well, okay, those guys are available, but now we need to get a real project manager in here"?
Not that I'm aware of, not that I
Okay.
was privy to, because my boss liked what I was doing. The GC didn't complain. And I showed up and I was doing it.
Am I understanding correctly that not only were you not a uh, what's the, I'm grasping for the word now. You weren't an actual project manager.
No,
That was not your job title by definition.
no.
And while the project managers at this company you were at, they each had one project that they were overseeing. You are not even a true project manager, but in all
No.
sense of the word, and you're overseeing 3 projects.
Well, it was two for about 6 months, and then there was a project manager who took one of them back.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
I ultimately I oversaw start to finish one of the
One of them.
projects.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but
So
never having run a project before.
I'm sitting here and I'm trying to think of what is the best way to articulate, what's going on here in the most respectful way. I don't know how to say this, but as I've gotten to know you, I mean, you're a dynamic woman and you've got a tremendous skill set that you bring to the table. You've got all these great experiences. Um, to the best of my knowledge, you're not like on the Mensa list, right? We're not talking about somebody with an IQ like upwards of 200, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I'm trying to say in the most respectful way that you seem like, you know, all these women that I know in the construction space that are they're smart, they're hardworking, especially for the women that have kids that are juggling all these different things. So again, I mean, you're really not in some ways you're not that different than a lot of women that are trying to make their way in this industry. And so for people that are looking for someone who maybe looks like them to fill these roles and say, oh, well, Irene, I mean, she's, what is she bringing to the table? What are these women bringing to the table? And the message is, give these women a chance. They don't look anything like you. They don't have the same path that you had, but give them a chance. Just step back and let them work their magic, and they're going to knock your socks off. And that's exactly what you did. So again,
Yeah.
I mean, I hope, you're like, oh, you're every woman, but yet you're proving that you can do this.
And that's what, that's the message that I ultimately want to leave, is that, and what I discovered along the way on that project is that, like, each of us is so much more capable than we realize.
Mhm.
And that, and I know a lot of women, oh, I don't know if I'm ready, or actually a lot of people, but I think a lot of women suffer from this a little bit more. I don't know if I'm ready, should I do it? So, a lot of the times they're not being given the opportunity. I was, but a lot of them either, but they also are second guessing themselves. It's like, no, like, you are amazing. You can do the hard thing. And that was the ultimate lesson on that project. I had my field experience, which was helpful, but I didn't even know the words that were being used in some of the meetings. And
But you figured
piecing,
it out.
I figured it out.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was, my first coordination meeting, my legs like shaking. I'm like sitting on the edge of my chair. I was like, someone's gonna realize I shouldn't be here. That was my thought the whole time. And like, okay, by the end of it, I'm like, okay, no one's kicked me out, so I guess I'll come back next week.
Yeah.
And then I just started realizing, and I started listening to the other people in the room who are all men, and for the most part, assuming by age, more experienced than myself. And I'm like, they don't have it all figured out either. Like,
No.
that was like a key moment when I was listening to another project manager, and I'm like, he doesn't know. Like, he's asking questions that, like, I feel like I would be asking, and being much newer to this. And I'm like, oh, okay, so no one has this all figured out.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a monumental experience to go through that and to figure it out as I went, and to come on the other side. I'm like, I did that. Like, every time I drive downtown, I see that building, and I will always, hopefully always see that building. And it's just like a reminder. Anytime I have something hard that comes up, are you kidding me? I did a 60-story high rise, no experience. I got this.
I think the difference, and that's got to be such an incredibly proud feeling you have, especially to have this big towering monument per se that you see. What I see the difference is, you're spot on. These guys don't have it figured out either. My friend Mia likes to remind people, she likes to remind women, you need to have the confidence of a mediocre white man. I just love that.
Yes.
I love that. She's really young, and she gives me the most hope that the next generation of women is going to be just fine, because they see through
Yes.
all of it. They're going to be just fine. But the difference is that women, when we do decide to be vocal about it, because there are a lot of women that are not going to share their feelings. They're going to keep it to themselves, or they're going to walk out of the room. They're going to be sitting there, knees shaking. They're going to walk out of the room and, feel all the feels about what's going on when they feel this imposter syndrome going on. Where if we're honest and say, you know what, I don't have the answer to this. I'm not sure. I'm going to figure it out. Yeah, there's always going to be haters. There's always going to be people that, go after the weaklings, if you want to call it that. But I think for the most part, my experience in the industry is that it's really amazing men that really do see that women belong in the room, have a seat at the table, should be part of it. They recognize, what women bring to the equation that's been missing for so long. And the more that we're comfortable, talking about the things, we don't know this, or we're figuring it out, or, whatnot, it's giving them the space to say, oh, okay, I don't know either. I'm figuring it out. I mean, it's not going to happen overnight, but that's one of the things that we're bringing to the table to make the industry better as a whole.
No, 100%. Actually, this reminds me of what I was going to say earlier, in that, so I belong to Professional Women in Construction, which is a great organization. And so there's always like, what role do men play within an organization for women in construction? And so, there's some people think, no, we should be primarily women because we need a safe space to have our conversations. And I support that, right? Like that makes sense. However, if, we've got about an average of 3 to 4% of women on the trade side in construction, I believe maybe pushing 14% in the industry as a whole, the 14% of us can't change the entire rest of the industry. So in order to make the biggest difference, we need those male allies, and to recognize that, like, me as a leader is going to look different than Joe as a leader. It's just not the same. We can be equally effective, but we're going to go about doing things a little differently. And again, differently, not wrong or not less than, but just differently. And when I would show up on a job site, I didn't get my way because I pounded my fist or screamed louder than everybody else. I got what I needed because I spoke to people respectfully, and they ultimately wanted to help me. And,
Mhm.
and that's how I've always done things, contrary to what I see. And again, I'm not saying all men do this by any means, but I see a lot of people using almost like brute force to do things, and that's may work on a very short-term basis, but that's contrary to developing relationships and actually building a tribe of people who are cheering for you, even ultimately.
You have to have women in this industry need to have their safe space where they can discuss things with other women and work through some challenges. I absolutely agree with you. But at the end of the day, the men and the women need to be in the room together learning, right? When you talk to people that are marriage counselors and you look at the statistics, the majority of marriages end because of a lack of communication. That's where it all starts, from a lack of communication. And when you think, and I've talked about this on other of our, conversations, that when you think about the fact that you're going to work, you're spending in some instances, upwards of 8 hours a day with someone, the communication is just as important at work as it is at home. If we expect our spouses to be able to read our mind, you expect your coworkers to read your mind. Well, that doesn't work at home. So why would it work in the corporate setting, right? And communicating, you go to therapy with your spouse to learn how to communicate better, to make sure both your needs are met and you're both, working towards a common goal. And the same should be held true in work. And for years and years and years, I mean, it's all about, we're investing in research and development, and we're investing in marketing, and all these things that are important to moving the needle forward. But at the end of the day, you have to take care of your most important asset, and that's your people. And if your people are
Yes.
not communicating, and if there's a dysfunction, the foundation of your home is unstable. And it's just a matter of time, whether it is a mild storm that comes through, or if it's Hurricane Katrina, right? And the whole thing is going to fall down. It's all going to fall down. So we need to make sure that men and women are in the same room and that we are learning how to be better communicators. I mean, that's it. This is not rocket science. This is
No.
not splitting the atom, but it's making the investment and recognizing, you had talked earlier about how the things that we do to support women in the industry, they actually are good they also help men. Rising tide lifts all boats, right? This is good for everybody. We need to make sure that we are keeping men and women in the same room and helping them learn to communicate better.
Yeah. No,
So we
I mean, yeah, that's so important. And I mean, and I feel like a lot of, and I've posted on LinkedIn about this, is that a lot of our men are like process focused, and they forget that what is driving the processes are the people.
Mhm,
And it's by taking care of the people before the process is what's going to make the difference.
mhm.
And it's, men kind of want things that are measurable, and they can see and they can touch and whatever else. And that's the thing, is you bring more women in, and you're able to help the people culture overall, because that's just kind of our natural strength, but we're stronger together, right? I mean, so there's study upon study out there that show that companies that are more diverse at the top do better. The
Mhm.
revenue is better, the profits are better, all of that is better. And so you don't have to, you're not like doing anyone a favor by promoting a qualified, woman to a position, executive position. You are ultimately helping your own bottom line and doing the smart thing. And but ultimately, to get those people in, you need to offer accommodations again, real life, family, flexibility, all those different things. And that's, again, that's, everyone's going to benefit from that.
Absolutely. We have to have you on for another conversation because we can go down a whole rabbit hole,
Yes.
talking about that. So let's talk a little bit more about these coaching. And you've got some upcoming webinars. You talk about 10 tips for a successful apprenticeship. There's from field to office, and then there's the path into the trade. So these are all different things that you're speaking about and that you're coaching about.
Yes. Yeah. And so, as I mentioned, going from, the field to the office opened up so many opportunities for me. I was in the field for 6 years, but I've been in the office for 19. And so that really is where I found my place. But a lot of women aren't aware that that is a transition they can make, and that it's actually a lot easier than they're likely convincing themselves that it is. So I have a webinar on Monday from the field to the office to explain, like, is this something you should consider? What would that look like? The pluses and minuses. So you reach out to me for that. And then on Saturday, I have a webinar about the 10 best tips that I figured out going through my apprenticeship program. I know there's a lot of women who are having a hard time or could use just some extra tips. And so I'm going to do that. Both of them are free. I will be doing some coaching programs, group coaching programs in September. So and I also will ultimately be doing one like when you're beginning project managers, just how to navigate that first project, asking for those first raises, what that could look like, and making sure they're getting paid what you're worth. And I've got a couple of I'm doing a talk about my experience as a first-time project manager and turning obstacles into opportunities. That one will be for NAWIC, a few months off. And just in speaking, I'm actually going to be speaking to my high school next month about, talking to kind of the younger recent graduates from the local high schools about what getting into the trades could look like for them.
Is your high school in Chicago?
It's in the Chicago suburb, in Park Ridge.
How exciting to go back and be like, oh,
yes.
What would I tell my 18-year-old self if I could do it all over again?
Right.
I know. Again, that's a whole nother conversation to have. How can people get in touch with you?
So you can email me at irene@successfulwomeninconstruction.com. Or on LinkedIn, Irene Walsh Garcia. I think I'm the only Irene Walsh Garcia on there. So pretty easy to get a hold of.
And they can also read the story that you wrote for us for MOXY. It's entitled "Using Storytime to Teach About the Built World." You talk about reading to your 5-year-old son and pointing out some PPE deficiencies. I think we'll call it that. Awareness is good, though.
It is. He's learning young. He knows what to look out for.
It's been delightful talking to you this morning, and thank you for what you're doing for the industry and to support women that are considering a career and that have made a career and that are looking to expand their career. One of my favorite quotes is, when you get where you're going, turn around and help her too. There was a time not long ago that she was you, and whether you're 5 years into your career or 25 years, there's always going to be somebody that's coming up behind us that's, watched us, that saw what we did. Maybe it's sharing too much, but if anyone ever, comments on something I'm doing or whatnot, and I say, oh my God, no, listen, this is an absolute shit show. This is hard. This is whatever. Like, here's the reality. I might look like the duck gliding across the water, but underneath, like everyone else, you're paddling like crazy.
Yes.
So helping set them up for success, to know that, it's a struggle, it's hard, but the reward is more than you ever imagined it could be. So it's just what you're doing is so important. And you talk about it in your bio that, you wish you had somebody like you all these years ago to help you.
Yes.
So thank you. Thank you for being that voice and being that mentor and being that sponsor and being that cheerleader and being that coach and maybe surrogate mom and surrogate big sister. I mean, you're getting all the labels, but they all fit so well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So give Irene a call. She is also available for speaking engagements, which we want to make sure we give you a plug for that too.
Thank you.
Thank you again for joining us for another conversation with MOXY. I'm Natasha Zibko, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.